of my way, human, or die.
Freeze! This is an actual scene taken directly from the Journeyman Project. This 7-foot-tall alloy beast is only one of the many obstacles you'll have to overcome when you play the Journeyman Project. You come from the future where the Earth is at peace, but you journey through the past where times are unraveling. This non-linear time travel adventure game puts you in the driver's seat of the world's first time machine. Somewhere, and for some reason, there has been an attempt to sabotage history, and you alone are responsible for discovering the source of this mayhem and bringing it to a halt. But enough about the story. Seeing is believing. So turn off the lights, crank up the speakers, and buckle up for a test drive of the adventure game you don't just play, you experience.
In the beginning, there was just a few of us who had a dream for what the future could hold in terms of photorealistic adventure game. I had been working on a project called Verge Interactive, which was taking up the majority of my life, but it showed me that I could do a large-scale game. We decided to build something that the world had never seen before. It later turned into the Journeyman Project. The original team grew very fast. The first person to get involved was Dave Flanagan, who ended up being the lead writer for the project. Immediately we got Farshid Almasazadeh involved, and he ended up being our lead technician and animator, and Greg Euler, who ended up being the programmer. We also recruited Jose Albanil, who had just graduated from art school and ended up being our lead 3D modeler throughout the project.
What I remember from the beginning of Journeyman and the beginning of Presto Studios, I was living with Michelle at the time, and we started coming up with ideas for a game that we could do. We had seen Spaceship Warlock. That was the first of the CD-ROM games, and we were pretty excited about it. We figured that we could do something at least as good as that.
Yeah, I remember that day when I got a call from Michelle actually saying that they've got this great new idea and they wanted to put together and have me come over anyways and talk to them about it. Dave and Michelle were sitting around the coffee table with this 4-page or 5-page overview of what they had created, and they said, hey, got some ideas, throw them in here. I think we're going to create something.
We're going to Macworld!
The first step was to create a prototype of the game, and what we did is we whipped together some graphics really fast, we threw together an interface, and we trotted off to Macworld 92 in San Francisco. We took a little bit of booth space from a friend of mine at Club Mac, and we showed this prototype. It went off great. We had these flyers, we handed out 10,000 copies of it, and everyone was just wondering when this product was going to ship. In all honesty, we didn't ship until a year later from that date, and only 5% of the graphics from that demo ever made it into the final shipping product.
After that point, after all the excitement that drilled up, we went home and we were just jazzed for months, and that just helped us. It spurred us on, and the game started turning into something.
It was after our Macworld 1992 show that we really realized that there was an opportunity to do something incredible, and we knew that we needed some more professional help to get this project done. At that time we enlisted Jack Davis and also Gino Andrews and eventually Phil Saunders to help round out the team and to add the professional level of experience that we really needed to give this product the punch.
Michelle and I first got together working on a project called Verbum Interactive, the world's first interactive magazine. With that we learned a couple things. One, that we enjoyed working together, that the art director, designer, program relationship was a very exciting one, a very dynamic, symbiotic relationship. But two, we also learned that we had the potential for doing an enormous CD-ROM based project.
Well, the differences between writing a linear script and writing an interactive script are tremendous. With a linear script, you can write it from point A to point B, tell whatever you like along the way. With an interactive script, it's much tougher. You've got to take into consideration all the branches, all the different possibilities of what the player may do, and the inventory items the player may have, for example. So you can't write it up as a linear story. You've got to write it up as a branching story. You've got to have several different documents, one containing a list of objects and other interactions, and so forth.
My job on the Journeyman Project was as conceptual designer, and I was responsible for visualizing all of the environments and props and essentially the worlds that you travel through in the game. A lot of what I do in conceptually working out these environments is really problem solving. It's a matter of thinking in terms of what would this device really be used for, how would it be used, and therefore what would it look like. A lot of the environments emerged out of the fact that we needed 3 distinct-looking time zones with different levels of technology in each, progressively looking more advanced. When we first started off, I was working on pretty highly detailed color sketches in marker, but by the end of it, we were reduced to having to do really quick pencil thumbnail sketches and have Jose rip them off of my desk and start modeling them up before I was even finished. An example of that was the machine room in the Mars time zone, where really it's almost an indecipherable scribble, but with a lot of arm waving and a lot of looking over Jose's shoulder, we managed to whip it into pretty much exactly what I had imagined in very little time.
It was my responsibility to talk with the conceptual designer to get a full understanding of his sketches before I took it to the 3D environment. Part of my job was to use the modeling tools of Swivel Pro, and I would take the drawings from the conceptual designer, and after I figured out how everything worked, I was able to break the model down and make the models by pieces. Once the models were done, I would hand it off to the people rendering the environments and animations.
Some of the creative 3D animations that I had to create for the Journeyman Project were, well, one of the major ones was the robot walking across the screen. That was quite a feat. The way I approached it was not to use what we were using for rendering. I actually went to a different package. Jose would give me the model in 3D with all of its swivel points set for all the joints, for example, elbow, where it's supposed to bend, and so on and so forth. And then I would take that and, using Infinity, animate each little part one piece at a time to try to make it look like a walking robot. The environments themselves have been set up in what we call electric image. It's a 3D animation systems program that we use to set the lighting, the moods. Some of the animation is done in it, and what is involved in it is a matter of setting up like a camera in the real world, moving it around in motion, taking snapshots of what you want to see, and lighting it just like as if it was a real set.
Once we had the three-dimensional models all set and done, the next step was to texture them. Whether that was done by creating the textures from scratch, bringing in photographic images that we had created, or by scanning in little plastic toys on our flatbed scanner, all this was being done in Photoshop. Once we had our final rendered images, we had another challenge that we faced, and that is that with the current version of electric image that we were using, we weren't getting the shadows and reflections necessary for true photorealism. We didn't have enough so that a person sitting in a darkened room with headphones on playing Journeyman could really suspend disbelief in terms of whether they were actually on Mars or underwater or even in a futuristic apartment building. So at that point what we had to do was retouch each of the 1,600 frames involved with Journeyman and get them to the point of true photorealism.
Defense Command Post on security alert. Access denied.
My responsibilities were to take scenes that came to my computer and to add foliage, to add music, to add depth as far as audibly to what you would see visually. For example, the subroom scene in NORAD, Jack Davis did some moving water and a lot of shadowy. There was a lot of dark feel in it, and what I did was I filled a bathtub with water, and I lowered a microphone in it and splashed the water around it. Did 2 or 3 different tracks of that to try to add a real movingness to the water. And then one of the scenes that you came from was an alarm in another room. I took that alarm sound, added a lot of reverb and a lot of echo to that, brought back down that sound volume and added that to the splashing water to create a new environment and a new sound. In the Mars maze, I knew that a person had 3 minutes in this maze, and by the end of their journey, they were going to be running out of oxygen, and I wanted to kind of create a sense of danger. So as the player plays this scene out, the music begins to slow down. A heartbeat starts to pulsate and get louder and louder and louder, and then heavy breathing toward the end of the track. So the track itself actually had an interactive feel to it along with the scene.
My job as programmer is to take all of the elements that people create, whether they be graphics, text, and audio, put them all together so you create a virtual reality type of experience. You immerse the user into that world. For instance, in the NORAD subroom, there is the ambient audio of an alarm going off. There is water sloshing in a pool near the submarines, and you hear all of that, you see it visually, and you experience it so that you feel that you're really immersed in that environment. All of the programming in the Journeyman project was done using Macromind Director. However, on the PC platform, we chose to use C code so that we would speed up the code that was running on that platform. We were developing graphics and code at the same time, so later time zones had more interactivity and more variables of what might happen, so I had to account for those later. So the code was actually changing through the whole process of developing the game until it was one final stable piece of code.
My responsibilities at Presto Studios was sales and marketing for the Journeyman project. Being a small company with limited experience and no previous titles, this was quite an undertaking. In January of '93, we launched a product at Macworld San Francisco and had a great response. We sold out of the booth. This was not only a lot of hard work, but it was very fulfilling to finally see our product in the hands of end users and see the excitement that surrounded it. It ended our production cycle and began our marketing cycle. And for the next 9 months, we proceeded to advertise and sell boxes out of our garage to the various distributors around the world, much to the curiosity of our neighbors.
There were a lot of people that thought we were crazy when we decided to start this thing. In fact, we didn't know how large it was going to get by the time we were done. In looking back on it, it ended up taking 2 years from the time we originally thought of it to finally shipping the product. We spent 15,000 man-hours on this at a cost of over $70,000 cash out of pocket, and we didn't pay ourselves salaries.